2, 3, let's go.
All right, we're back. Live and direct from the planet of Queens, New York. Soccer Senseis, Rodrigo Salazar, Elisa Tunda. We're here with Ben Lyttleton, right? Lyttleton. Said it right? Okay, good. He is he's an esteemed scholar of the soccer arts. He writes for SI. He wrote a very, very interesting article about Vieira's appointment to the NYCFC bench. Patrick Vieira, the legendary Arsenal defensive midfielder, who has some really strong battles against Man United, particularly Roy Keane. I remember those like as if they were yesterday. But Ben, let's start off with your book. You wrote a book called 12 Yards. Let's talk about that first.
Okay, well, as an Englishman, Rodrigo, something I'm very familiar with is my team losing on penalty kicks at major tournaments. We've lost 6 out of 7 shootouts just when we think we're going to win a trophy, a long cut penalties, and they hurt our chances. And so I set about writing a book to discover why England always fail at penalty shootouts. And as I carried on my research, I realised that penalties are not just an English phenomenon. Obviously, they happen all across the globe, but other countries are affected by penalty kicks and penalty moments just as much as England are. So I looked into why Holland always lose at penalty shootouts, or why Ghana often lose at penalty shootouts, and I sought out players whose careers were marked by significant penalties, not just scoring them like Antonin Panenka did in 1976 to win the European Championship for Czechoslovakia at the time, but the guys that missed important penalties as well, like Didier Cisse, who missed him in the 1982 World Cup, and said that as a result of missing this one penalty kick, his whole life changed. His career, not only as a player, but as a person, and the way he was seen after his retirement as a player changed. Clubs apparently did not want to give him a job as a coach because they thought he was mentally weak because he'd missed one kick at a high pressure moment. So the more I looked into it, the more I realised that this is a global phenomenon, and it's not really about technique or football ability at all. It's about psychology and the psychology of performing under pressure.
Okay.
When you're under pressure, can you keep your cool, keep your nerve and succeed, or do you succumb and potentially face a totally different life and a different career and a different legacy? Because we always remember the players that miss the penalties.
Yeah, the name of the book is 12 Yards, and the full name is?
The full name is 12 Yards, The Art and Psychology of the Perfect Penalty. So I hope by the end of reading it, you will know exactly what to look out for when you watch players take penalties. The guy that rushes his kick, the guy that turns away from the goalkeeper when he should be looking straight at the goalkeeper, the guy that doesn't wait for the goalkeeper to move first. There are all sorts of strategies and methods that can add to your success from the penalty spot. So there are lots of tricks to learn, and hopefully reading it will give you an insight into that.
Wow, Alex, question?
Yeah, I remember the 1994 World Cup final when Baggio missed the penalty and Franco Baresi as well. And then you see someone like Materazzi come in a World Cup final and doesn't seem to really pause for a second. He just goes right in there and bang, scores it.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant point. I in fact devote a whole chapter basically to that shootout and that incident. And the reason that was so important is something called status anxiety. So researchers have shown that players of high status in a team, and you're talking about captains, but also guys that have won individual awards like the World Player of the Year award, the Best Player in the League award, the Top Scorer award, the majority of them have a worse record from penalty kicks than the guys like Materazzi. Think of Fabio Grosso in 2006. This was a guy that hadn't taken a penalty for 5 years. The last penalty he took was in the 3rd division in Italy. He was like totally under the radar as a player, but there was less pressure on him simply because he was not this elevated status. And the guys that have the lower status actually have a much better record from penalty kicks than higher status. Look at Messi in the last year. This is the best player in the world who went on a run of scoring only 5 out of 10 penalty kicks. Hazard at the moment, very soon after winning the Player of the Year award in the EPL at Chelsea, he's missed his last 2 penalties, and at the moment is on a run of, again, like Messi, missed 5 out of his last 10. Now, these guys are among the world's elite. There's no way their conversion rate should be only 50%. There's a reason behind it, and it's because of the added pressure on their shoulders because of their higher status.
So you obviously you did a lot of research. Did you speak to like psychologists and stuff like that? Like, how did you get with all these terminologies and everything?
Well, yeah, I definitely spoke to psychologists. A lot of them. I spoke to researchers in sports science. But some of my most interesting research was away from football. So I spoke to other coaches in other disciplines, in other sports. I spoke to a handball goalkeeper who was a specialist in saving penalties at handball. I spoke to a water polo striker or swimmer, I should say, who was an expert at scoring penalties in water polo. A golfer, a cycling coach, a rugby union coach. All these guys, their athletes are faced with the same kind of issue. They are performing under pressure. So what does it take to succeed under pressure? It's no different. In England, the excuse about penalties is always, well, we couldn't practice because you can't recreate the conditions to practice a penalty, because when it's the real thing, you never know how you're going to feel. But it's exactly the same in golf. If you've got a putt to win the Ryder Cup or to win the US Masters and it's 10 foot, you can't recreate that in practice, but you just practice so much that it becomes second nature to you. The same for tennis players. If you've got a second serve to win Wimbledon or the US Open or Roland Garros, Novak Djokovic can't recreate that in training, but there comes a moment in his career where he'll face that moment, and he has to be ready for it. So it's about how you practice, and it's about practicing with purpose. So that was really interesting for me as well.
Wow. Speaking of, high pressure moment, Patrick Vieira is now the coach of NYCFC. And before we talk about that, what is the sense of in England of the MLS? Because I know they just got a TV deal and they were making a big deal about that. But how does England perceive the MLS, and how do pundits perceive the MLS?
I think they see it as a growing league, a league that is not yet at the level of a major European league, but I think they can see that there is room for it to develop and improve. I think the fact that a lot of players at the end of their career come over there for a big payday is not necessarily seen as a positive. Steven Gerrard obviously was there recently, and everyone is expecting Zlatan Ibrahimovic to come over next year. I mean, I guess that helps in some ways, but it's also very, very difficult for the coaches, I guess, because, you have a guy who's on an enormous salary at one end of the dressing room, and then 8 guys that are on a fraction of that in the rest of the team. So it's very, very difficult to get that balance. And, in England, and I guess in the rest of Europe, the salaries are much more equitable. At least, they're bigger across the board. Mm-hmm. So that's quite a challenge, I think, for any coach. But in terms of quality, I think it's perceived as some way lower than what we're seeing in Europe at the moment.
So like less League On, maybe under League On, over the Belgian league, something like that.
Well, if you take out PSG from Liga, I think maybe, but maybe even lower. I mean, the thing is, if English clubs recruited more from the MLS, and the guys like Dempsey who've gone back, and Breck Shea who's gone back, they need kind of trailblazers to come over, stay in the EPL and be successful in the EPL. So when Dempsey was here and was playing really well, was scoring lots of goals, everyone was going to the MLS to find more Dempseys, to find more players like that. At the moment, I think the only guy is Jeff Cameron, who's in and out of the side at Stoke. So I think there's definitely the talent for outfield players. Of course, you've got Guzan and Howard as well. But I think there's the talent within the USMNT structure. And I think they develop very good players, but more need to come over to be the pioneers, or at least to follow in the footsteps of guys like Dempsey.
Yeah.
And then you'll see more coming over. But Dempsey's very happy there. I mean, he could have been solid Premier League pro for the last 2 years, but I guess.
Well, he was playing for Spurs, though, you know.
Yeah, he did well there, and he did well at Fulham, but
Yeah.
I guess he's getting more money at Seattle, so you have to consider the whole package.
No, in Seattle, I mean, we think of like the fanfare and the atmosphere in Seattle. It's a whole different thing. It feels very European there. It feels a little bit like Dortmund, if you will. You have DeAndre Yedlin, who was bought by Spurs and now is on loan with the club there, Sunderland. He's
He's getting time actually, so he's playing a little bit now. He was not playing at Spurs, so it'll be interesting to see if he gets some games. I think he's a decent prospect. So yeah, he would be a good one to watch.
I think he can do pretty well. He's going to do pretty well over there. Alice, question?
Yeah, you mentioned the disparity between salaries, and going to the point of Soccernomics, I know that you've done a lot of research in that sector, and I remember one of the chapters said that it's not really relevant how much you spend. You go on a spending spree like Man United has gone over the past 2 years. It's the amount. I mean, the amount of success is relative to the salaries of the club. And that's a good point you made there regarding MLS. What do you think the MLS should do? What do you think is lacking in MLS to sort of to make those European fans wake up at 3 a.m. and watch an MLS game?
Or just like you guys wake up early at the weekend to watch.
But it's different to watch. Yeah. Waking up early to watch Arsenal versus Man United is different than watching Orlando City versus, Real Salt Lake. Come on now.
Yeah, I know. It's a really good question. The obvious and really big difference is promotion and relegation, right? There is no jeopardy element in the MLS. It's a closed shop. So, I mean, I can see why there is that system, but compared to the rest of the world almost, no other league operates like that. So you are taking out a huge amount of competitive interest, because if a team plays badly in England, they get relegated and they have to start all over again, and they lose revenue, and they will lose their best players, and they'll probably lose their coach, and they will drop a division and try and build themselves up, and that that element of jeopardy adds so much drama to the narrative of a league story. You guys have a winner who wins who wins the cup at the end of the season. But if you have a bad season, you finish bottom of your league, you just start again the next year. There's no element of jeopardy, and that, I think, is of real interest to fans. I mean, you think about what happened to Dortmund last season. You mentioned them, and I only bring them up because for a lot of last season, they were in the bottom 5 of the table in Germany.
Like Chelsea now.
And this season, although it's early days, Chelsea are in the bottom 5 in England.
Hard.
Right? Now, I don't think they're going to stay there. Of course they're not. But if they did...
Let's hope they will, though.
Well, I couldn't possibly comment on that because I'm neutral.
I know, of course.
But, if they were still there in 6 months' time, oh my goodness me, then it's going to get really interesting, because no one is going to want to miss a Chelsea game in case they continue to drop down the table. And how that jeopardy element adds so much drama to it. And I think as long as the MLS lacks that element, it will always lag behind in terms of interest from elsewhere.
And one of the things about Vieira being a coach, I mean, it's very hard to attract European coaching talent, because there's so many variables with the MLS. There's no relegation or promotion, the whole draft situation, bringing in players. Like you had David Villa, you had Lampard, you had Pirlo, who were making astronomical figures, and you had the other guys that weren't making a lot of money. So that's a lot of things that a European coach may not want to deal with, and that's a bad thing when you really think about it. Obviously you want American coaching talent to perform, but Vieira, why is he taking this job, really? I mean, is it because Arsenal didn't want to? He said something about, Wenger didn't call me. So was it kind of like, what, we're going to lose him to Arsenal eventually if we don't give him a high profile gig, or what was his thinking behind that?
No, it's not that, because I think he has already lost to Arsenal. And while in theory you might think, oh, Arsenal is the club of his heart and it's the club of his dreams, I actually think the way City have handled the whole thing has been so brilliant that now Vieira is very loyal to Manchester City, because they took a chance on him. I mean, in 2011 when he retired, he was looking for things to do, and they said, look, come and work for us, get to know the whole business, come and spend time in different departments, and then we can decide where you go and where you see your future. And so he did that. He worked in communications, he worked in the commercial department, he worked in management, he travelled, clocked up a lot of miles doing foreign commercial deals, working as an ambassador abroad, seeing what was going on in the community, and he got an overall sense of the business and what goes into running a football club. And at the end of it, he decided he wanted to go back and become a coach. Now, he may well have decided that anyway, but City have given him an overall holistic education in what goes into running a football club, which he would never have got at Arsenal. And Arsenal, notoriously, and this is one of Wenger's real weak points, I think, he doesn't want to ask for help, and he won't tap into this knowledge base.
So French.
That comes from this team, the Invincibles, 2003-04. So there are loads of players in that team who were desperate for the call from Wenger to help out. Bergkamp was one of them. He's now working at Ajax. Robert Pires is another. He trains at Arsenal occasionally, but is nowhere near the coaching staff. I mean, he'd love to do that job. Tony Adams is another obvious one. Jens Lehmann. They're these guys. These guys are leaders. They have an aura about them. And if they were sitting on the bench next to Wenger, I think they would carry a certain weight, and they'd carry a weight in the dressing room, because they are serial champions. And Arsenal lack that at the very, very top. Yeah. But I think at the moment, Man City, or at least the City Football Group that owns these clubs, have played it very, very sensibly with Vieira, and have said, look, we've given you an opportunity. You've coached essentially the youth side, actually the reserve side, and he's done very well. So the next option for him is to become a senior coach. So where does he take that job? He could have had been offered a job in the Championship, which is the second tier in England. He could be offered a job in the Premier League at a club, in the next 6 months if he hangs on tight. But if you mess up your first job in England, it is very, very difficult to get a second job. Very difficult. And in fact, 56% of managers who have their first job in England, they don't get another one. So it's 50-50 really. And Vieira wants to be a coach for the long term. In Italy, it's a totally different story. If you fail in your first job, you come back and get another one. It's not a problem. I mean, Benitez is Spanish, but he's another guy. I think he failed in his first 2 or 3 jobs in Spain, but he kept on going, and someone appointed him, I think it was at Tenerife, and he did really well. So other countries don't have this stigma of, if you fail in your first job, you're rubbish, you're not going to get work. But in England, that is definitely the case. So I think the City bosses talked this through with Vieira and said, look, if you work in a New York City FC and it doesn't go well, that's normal, because it's your first job. It might happen. Don't worry about it. But that is, whatever happens in the MLS next season with Vieira, that is not going to affect his job prospects when it comes to another job. If he does really well, he might end up with a City job. Although going from MLS to City is a huge leap, I think.
Huge.
There will be a job in between, I'd imagine, but there is less pressure on him here, because he can make mistakes. I know the spotlight will be on him in the States, but it won't be on him in the same way. And one thing I pointed out in the Sports Illustrated piece, he can't get relegated. So no matter how bad it is, he's not going to carry that stigma. Finishing bottom of the table, okay, that's one thing, and it may yet happen. But being relegated is, a nasty stigma to carry around in your first job. And so I think Vieira has shown the same loyalty to City that they showed to him 4 years ago when he retired. And they said, look, we'll take a chance on you and we'll educate you. And now it's his turn for a bit of payback.
It's pretty foolproof, you can't, you can't get relegated, you'll be last at the table, but okay, you'll still be here next year, it's not like, everything's going to go out the window. So I guess it makes sense. You're right. It makes perfect sense for Man City to do that. That was the question.
Yeah, I think it's a great. What I'm looking forward to Patrick Vieira is well, I think even this year New York City FC was maybe around 10 points off the playoff mark. 8 out of 12 teams make the playoffs, so it's not extremely difficult to make the playoffs in the MLS. What I can't wait to see is how he's gonna sort of keep everyone at bay between those 3 top players, Villa, Pirlo, and Lampard. I don't think it's gonna be easy to sort of tell someone, you're gonna sit on the bench today, this and that, because I've seen that Pirlo and Lampard. I don't know, maybe it's too early, but I don't see that sort of that compatibility between those 2 players on the middle of the pitch.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, at the moment, that's his main issue, isn't it? So, how do you get those 3 to work together, to play well together? But this is only year 1 of the project, so there are going to be problems early on. It seems strange that they've bought 2 veteran players to essentially play in the same area of the field, and that is not always going to be easy. And I guess these guys need time to adapt to it as well. But I think having someone like Vieira, who has been in both positions, he's been the guy that is the lowest paid in the dressing room and has the dreams of making it, and he's been the guy who's won the World Cup, won the Euros, won the Champions League, gone a season unbeaten in the Premier League. So he's been at the top 12, so he understands both sides, and the sense you get from talking to him is not only does he have an aura, but he also has a sense of empathy for these players, not just the big ones, but actually, the worker bees and the guys who need to keep on side. So I think that's very important. I think that will help him as well. And I guess he needs the buy-in of the 3 big players to make it work. But after year 1, I think it's a lot to ask for them all to succeed straight away. I think it's going to be difficult, but I think next season, I'd imagine they'll have a better season and they'll do better simply because it's year 2 of the project and they're more used to it.
And they didn't really do that bad. I mean, they almost made the playoffs. And one of the things that you mentioned, which is a really important point, was the fact that he has 3. Vieira had 3 coaches that he can learn from. We'll talk a little bit about that point. That was brilliant.
Well, if you've played for all these great clubs, you're going to have great coaches, aren't you? I mean, he spent 9 years at Arsenal playing under Arsene Wenger, so he's going to know a bit about that. Take some lessons from that. He played under Fabio Capello twice at AC Milan and at Juventus, and he played under Jose Mourinho, which we often forget. But in 2008, Mourinho was at Inter, and so was Vieira. So he's played under 3 of the best modern-day coaches, I guess, of their generation. And he gave a very interesting interview to L'Equipe earlier in the year when he talked about what he'd learned from each coach. And he said that from Wenger, he learned about having a good relationship with the players. Wenger apparently, in 10 years of Vieira being there, he only shouted at the players once. And that was when they were playing against Man U, and I think they were 3-0 down at half-time. I can't remember the final score, but, you get a lot of coaches that are ranters and ravers and just shout at the players all the time, and Wenger is not like that. And I'd imagine Vieira is not like that either. And from Capello, he got a sense of tactics and a real idea of the importance of details, positioning, sense, and how in the middle of training Capello would stop everyone, make them freeze and say, right, you need to move 2 steps to the left, you need to move 2 steps back, and just getting everyone in the right position. And this kind of minutiae was really important to Capello. And from Mourinho, it was about the training sessions, the intensity, the organisation. So they'd start at a certain time, they'd finish at a certain time. The players would have 1 minute for a drink break, not 2. All these things just feed through the culture of the club, so they give a sense of professionalism, of doing things the right way, and of making sure that everyone knows that there is one guy in charge, and if you cross him, you pay the price. So these are things that he's taken on board, but he said himself, I can't pretend to be anyone else, I can't copy these guys, I have to be myself. And in a way, he's got to make his own mistakes, but he's also got to develop his own style of coaching. And I think he has an aura about him, but he is very softly spoken. He looks like a giant, and when he's on the pitch, he played like a beast. But actually, he's a very gentle guy. He's softly spoken. I'd imagine he'd be like an empathetic coach who doesn't rant and rave. I think he'd be very good with the young players. I think he will be a very successful coach. I just don't know if he'll be a successful coach in New York. But I think in the long term, he will be a successful coach.
Okay, and you brought a point about his playing days. Do you see? I mean, I didn't really rate Francis Coquelin as much as I do now. Obviously, he's one of the top defensive midfielders. Is he in Vieira's shadow? Is there anything there? Like, do you see him being as good as him eventually?
No way! No way!
That's just me being an Arsenal fan.
What? Sorry?
That's just me being an Arsenal fan, trying to,
Arsenal fan. Right. Well, you must appreciate that. You have a guy who's won the World Cup, the European Championship, 3 Premier League titles, 4 Serie A's, 5 FA Cups. Coquelin's won 1 FA Cup. I mean, I know he's young, but he only got on the side because Jack Wilshere was injured last year. And okay, he's doing great. He's doing great. And earlier this year, it all worked because the Arsenal players went to Wenger before the game away at Man City and said, look, we need a plan B. We're always playing plan A. And when we go away from home against a big side, we've been punished so badly in the last few years. They lost 6-0 at Chelsea. They lost 5-1 at Liverpool. They lost 6-3 at Man City because they're playing in such an open way. So the players said to him, look, just tighten it up a bit when we're away from home, please. So he said, okay. He called Coquelin back from his low period at Charlton. Just when Coquelin was playing well at Charlton, they were building the team around him, and Coquelin was not sure whether he wanted to come back at all. He was happy, he was playing regularly, and the week after he got called back, he was stuck on the bench against West Ham. And the week after that, he was on the bench against QPR. He actually played 5 minutes in that game. And the week after that, he was on the bench again. And then he started against Man City. And I don't know if this was part of Wenger's master plan or it just happened. But they beat Man City at the Etihad, and suddenly Arsenal's season totally clicked. Coquelin looked like a world beater, and Arsenal now have this way of playing, which is you can be more defensive away from home and you can go for it at home. And it works, and Coquelin is very important to that. But this is a guy who's been playing well for 1 calendar year, right? So that's 9 months worth of games. He's played well for 30 games. Come back to me not when he's won a World Cup, okay, because you don't always win a World Cup, but when he's been the best player in his position for 10 years, then you can compare him to Vieira.
Trust me, yeah.
He's so far short. He's not even in the France squad. Now that's also no bad thing because France have a really good midfield at the moment. They've got Pogba, they've got Matuidi, they've
Kondogbia.
They've got Schneider. They've got good players in midfield, but Coquelin is no Vieira yet.
Well, you know what? I agree with you in a way because when I had him in FIFA, I was playing career mode with Arsenal. One of the first guys I sold was Coquelin because he was shite, like real bad. Like, so I see what he's saying. But I don't want to take up all your time, Ben. Let's talk a little bit about Champions League. Final question: do you think Man City will finally break through? I mean, Raheem Sterling has done really well. I'm a little surprised that he, all the pressure, all the stuff, all the talk, everything else about him, going from Liverpool, et cetera, he's doing pretty well. But does Man City have a chance to really, go forward this year?
Well, it depends how you define breakthrough, because they can certainly go further than they've ever gone before. Now, they've never reached the last 8 of the Champions League, and this season the priority really is getting into the last 4 minimum. But for me, there's just one team that are head and shoulders above everyone at the moment, and that's Bayern Munich. They're so far ahead of everyone else. It's like they're playing a different game. And I really hope that they win the Champions League this year, because this is the final year of Pep Guardiola's contract. At the moment, he might extend it. In fact, I would expect him to extend it in December. And we're seeing something different, because he's taken a side that had won the treble 2 years ago. They've walked easily 2 league titles in Germany, but they've fallen short in the Champions League, both times in the semi-finals, first to Barcelona, then to Real Madrid. And that can happen because in the big games, when you're really at the business end of the season, it's about small margins. And Lionel Messi played the best game of his career against Bayern Munich this season, and that's basically what knocked Bayern out. But what Guardiola is doing is extraordinary. You know, he's picking teams without a single centre back. He's picking teams sometimes without a midfielder. He's playing 5 strikers or 4 attacking players in a 4-2-4. Last season, Bayern were much more predictable in the way they're attacking. This season, they're playing through the wings more with Douglas Costa.
Oh, what a player!
Yeah, what an amazing signing. Now, Chelsea could have signed him for 30 million this summer, and said they went for Pedro. But you look at Costa now. Who would you rather have? I mean, the guy is a beast this season. But not just him. Kingsley Coman. I mean, he's a guy that people knew about for years. He was at PSG, not playing, so he went to Juventus. Played a little bit at Juve last year, not as much as he wanted. Everyone knew about him, and yet Bayern were the only ones that not only went for him, he's 19 years old, but they're picking him in the side now. And that's partly because Robin is injured, but in a year's time, they're not going to care if Robin is fit or not, because Coman is going to be the main guy. And they've got him on a 2-year loan deal with an option to buy for 20 million euros, which is nothing. In 2 years. So, they're picking him now, and they're going to want him to stay. And he's going to want to stay because he's getting game time at one of the best clubs in the world. So, for me, Bayern are the best. Barcelona just behind them, and then it's take your pick: City, PSG, Real Madrid. I guess are the teams behind them. But it's a really exciting Champions League this year. I think it's going to be good.
Yeah, and you also mentioned David Alaba. He's like you call him a prototypical Guardiola player. He could play everywhere, anywhere on the pitch.
I love this guy. This guy's awesome. So next week, every year, the Guardian newspaper in England do a list of the top 50 players in the world, and I get really excited about it. I'm on the judging panel.
Oh, nice.
I'm very proud to say, and I get a list of kind of 200 players in the world, and I select my top 50, and then they take. I think they have 50 judges, so you can see that there's basically you work out who gets the most votes, or whatever. And for me, Alaba, top 10 player this year, top 10 player, maybe even top 5. But he is so good in any position. He's started off as a left back, has played in midfield. Against Arsenal, he popped up on the left wing.
Mm-hmm.
He scored a goal from the number 10 position. He set up a goal from left wing. He started at left back. I mean, what the hell is he doing?
He's everywhere.
He's everywhere. And you know what else? Guardiola says his best position is a centre back.
I know, I read that. You put that.
He doesn't play. I mean, it's outrageous, this guy. So,
crazy.
Yeah. If you see him in the top 10 in the world players, you'll know that's because I've put him ahead of Messi and Ronaldo as my number 1.
Definitely. Ben, thank you so much for joining us. You could be here for another hour. We're all soccer nerds. It's crazy. But again, check out Ben on Twitter. It's at BNLYT, right? And get his book, 12 Yards. It's great. I mean, it's I haven't read it yet, but I think me and him are gonna start a book club. It's really, really compelling what you did, talking about penalty. Again, thanks for joining us on Soccer Senseis, and we'll definitely come back again, man.
No problem. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Nice to chat. Cheers.
All right, cheers.